Just okay, perfect. Can everyone hear me okay? I was notified that my audio is breaking up.
Yes.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so Louis looks like he's frozen. He'd just be signing out and joining us back in. Technical problems. But welcome everyone today. We're just gonna give a couple of more minutes and hopefully have more people join in. Hope Dr. Bass is all right with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, everyone, I think we're going to be held back because Louis is going to take a few minutes. So we'll just start off, Shankar, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I know it's really early in some parts of the world and it's lunchtime for us here in the UK. Thank you, Dr. Basu, for joining us today as well. So Dr. Basu would be talking us through navigating the US and UK academic job markets. From his experience, he did his PhD at Nanyang. Shankar, you're not allowed to laugh at my pronunciations. But yeah, so he did his PhD at Nanyang. He did his MBA in India, and he's now here at with us at Leeds University as associate professor of marketing. So he'd be walking us through what the challenges and experiences he had navigating those markets and securing a job in the UK, and also being a part of the AMA job market at his time. So, and how, you know, learning from those experiences could help us as doctoral students to navigate our own journeys. So thank you, Dr. Basu, for joining us. Do you want to start or take the lead?
Yeah, okay. Thanks everyone for joining today. And this is what we'll be talking about today. So about the AMA. So when I say US job market, basically I'll be talking about the AMA. So what happens at the AMA job market and how that is similar or different from the UK market. So what are the structures, what are the timelines these two job markets follow. I'll take a better look at what AMA is, and then a more detailed look at the UK market. And then I'll be talking about what I experienced when I was a PhD student a few years back. Okay. While doing all these things, I had to do this balancing act, because I know that some of you are PhD students in schools which have traditionally gone to the AMA market. But at the other time, on the other hand, there are many people who for whom AMA market might be something completely new. So I'll try to give you a good introduction, but at the same time also direct you to resources which you can look at if you want to know things in a bit more detail. Okay. Uh, and if you have any questions, just feel free to ask while I'm talking. So you can raise your hand or you can write in the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat box as well. Okay, so a bit about me, and it's not a bit about me right now, but what my profile was when I was on the job market. Okay, so I did my PhD from Nanyang Technological University, and from 2012 to 2017. So it's a 5 years PhD, like how it is in many US schools or many other schools in Asia. My research area was consumer behavior. So for those of you who already know the job market well, it's not the best place to be in, because there are other sub areas of marketing which are more attractive to recruiters. But consumer behavior is something that interested me, and that's what my area was. My job market year was 2016, and my AMA was held in Atlanta. Why I'm mentioning this is because my information about AMA might be a little bit outdated, but I have tried to keep in touch with other people who are going on the job market and getting a sense of what things might be changing. So hopefully it's not that outdated. But more importantly, one of the big challenges that I faced was I was the first student from my marketing PhD program to go to either the AMA or the UK market. And I'll talk a little bit about the challenges that you might face as someone who does not have enough support system in terms of institutional knowledge. My institution was very supportive, but the PhD students before me never attempted these markets, right? So they went to very good schools in Asia, but they never went to AMA. So I would talk a little bit about how I navigated this whole thing as being the first timer. In terms of papers, I had a paper which was published in Journal of Experimental Psychology General, and I was the third author in that paper. It's a very good journal, but it's not something that is very popular. So if you, for example, in psychology, if you publish in Psychological Science or JPSP, there is some kind of name recognition, but this journal is good, but it did not have that kind of name recognition. I had a revise and resubmit from OBHTP when I was on the market, so that helped. It's a FT50 journal, as you might know. My job market paper was not even in the review process, so it was my dissertation, and it was about regulatory focus and decision making. Why is this important? Because if you know the CB area, this topic of regulatory focus is not the most attractive one. And I had a pipeline of about 4 projects, so at different stages. So I had one other working paper and few papers. They were not papers, they were just studies that were completed. I also did some teaching at the undergrad level, introduction to marketing, and I had good teaching ratings. So as you would see, if you follow the job market, the job market very well, this is not the most attractive profile, but this is not bad. Okay, so that's how my profile was when I was on the market. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what AMA is the American Marketing Association Summer Conference, and every year it is held somewhere in the US, generally during July or August, and it follows a very structured kind of timeline. So let me try to do the spotlight thing. Yeah, so this is how it works. Generally, so a US PhD or a US style PhD is a 5 years program or a 6 years program, depending on how long people want to take. What happens is, on the penultimate year of their program, or for example, the middle of their 4th year in January, people start preparing their package. So things that you would use to apply to schools. During May or June, the school starts advertising for interviews to be held at this AMA conference. Okay, just before this AMA conference, the interviews schedules are finalized. Once the interviews are done, some of the candidates are shortlisted. They are given flyouts, which means that they are invited to that particular school's campus to come and give a job talk, maybe a 1.5 hours job talk, and then meet all the faculty members, PhD students. On a particular day, only one person is given a flyout. Okay. So if there are 6 candidates, for example, who are shortlisted for a particular school, the flyouts will happen over 6 different days, stretched over 2 or 3 weeks. So once the flyout process of a particular school is completed, uh, the the school would make an offer. Okay, so this would be somewhere around Thanksgiving in the US. If you get an offer, you have some time to decide. If you are not successful here, there is also a secondary market which happens after AMA. So it's less structured. Sometimes interviews happen in the winter AMAs, other times interviews happen on Skype. Once again, there is a flyout and this whole offer and flyout thing happens. Okay, and by hopefully by the time by March or April, you would have a job and you would start your new job in September. Uh, Among all, so this is what the job market is, but you also need to think about your PhD. So what happens to your PhD is before AMA, you do something called an internal oral defense, and you do your final defense after you already have a job in hand. Okay, so this is somewhere where you start your final year of PhD. Okay, why is this important? If your school has traditionally not gone to AMA, this PhD structure is not followed. Okay, so for example, back in 2016, we used to do internal oral defense somewhere here, couple of months before the final defense. But many schools who go to AMA would want to see that you have completed this step of your PhD, which gives them some kind of security that you are about to finish. Okay, so this is something that is important. If your school doesn't follow, you might want to do this before you go to AMA. Okay, there are some excellent resources for AMA. There's this AMA transitions guide by AMA, and it gives a very good overview of the process. DocSIG, who are conducting this particular talk, they have this who went where survey every year, and it is a survey of all the job market placements that happened in the previous year. Every year, this blog publishes guidance for job market candidates who are aiming for the AMA. So what you should do, what you should not do, etc. One thing to keep in mind is that all these guides are written with keeping in mind people who are from the US or who are doing a 5 years US style PhD and who are targeting North American schools. Okay. So you should look at these guides, but at the same time, keep in mind that the process that you might need to follow might be different. Okay. What about the UK market? So the difference between the US and the UK market stems from the fact that the PhD itself is different. So a PhD in the UK is a 3 years PhD, and people start looking for a job once they are towards the end of their PhD, not in the penultimate year. Okay, so if you start towards the end of your final year of PhD, when you're starting to write up your dissertation, you would see job ads. So the job ads don't follow a structure like in the AMA. So the job ads are rolling in nature. So every week you will see one or the other university posting a job ad. You will apply, you will interview, you will get an offer, and you will start a new job. The new job need not start in September. It can start anytime during the year. Okay, so this UK market is much less structured than what we saw just now in terms of the US or the AMA market. Okay, so that is one big difference in terms of how the two markets differ. So one is more structured and one is less structured. So there are some other differences as well. So I have created this table. Uh, when I say AMA jobs, I mean tenure track jobs. And when I say UK jobs, I mean normal UK jobs. So there are tenure track jobs also in the UK as well, but that is not what the main focus of this table is. So as you would see, the structure is much higher, it's much more structured in for an AMA or a tenure track job, but for UK jobs, it's much less structured. I mean, the job market. The time from application to offer. So the first time you apply for a job to the time you get an offer is much longer in AMA because there's this whole AMA interview involved and there are flyouts, etc., etc. For UK jobs, this might be much shorter. So to give you an example, our school advertised a position uh, in April, and the deadline was sometime in the first week of May. We will interview candidates towards the end of May, give them an offer by June. So it's a very short 2-month time period that we'll be following. Okay, that's why it is also rolling in nature, because schools keep posting job ads and then very quickly get the whole recruitment process happens. The time you from where the time from which you get an offer to your acceptance is also quite long for tenure track jobs. Sometimes you're given a whole month to make up your mind. Maybe you're waiting to hear back from other schools. In the UK, it is less flexible, so you might need to make up your mind within a week, for example. And similarly, the time from acceptance to start, so once you have a job in hand to when you start your work, can be quite flexible in the UK. So it can be as short as 2 months, or it can be quite long as 6 months. Uh, Most tenure track jobs start at the start of the academic year, so sometime in September. But in the UK, you can join your job whenever you want. Not whenever you want, whenever the school wants, but the schools are generally more flexible. So for example, I joined my job in April, which was in the middle of nothing. It is not even the start of a term. The positions are called assistant professors in a tenure track job. In the UK job, we don't have a tenure system. So what is the tenure system? You get 5 or 6 years to, or maybe 7 years to come up with a bunch of papers, maybe 4 or 5 top tier papers, and then you get a permanent position in that particular school. In the UK, in most schools, you start off with a permanent position. So there is no tenure system. Your job is sort of secured. But there is a promotion system, so you can get promoted to associate professor after 3 years or 4 years, depending on your performance. Money-wise, because tenure track systems have higher requirement, higher pressure, the rewards are also higher. So you get a lot of, the salary is generally high in the US, and not just in the US, many other markets which follow a tenure system. So for example, Singapore or Hong Kong, the salary is much higher, but at the same time, they have much higher expectations in terms of the number of papers that they need for you to make tenure in these schools. In the UK, you have more peace of mind because they don't have very strict requirement in terms of the number of papers you need. They might be okay with less number of papers, but with a different kind of profile. Maybe you are the program director of a master's program. So they are okay with these kind of things as well. The cost of living in the UK is also lower, but at the same time, you have less money, and the money can be less than half of what you would earn in the US, but then the cost of living will also be quite less. So next, I will be moving to the US market, to the AMA in detail, but any questions so far? Does it mean the salary in UK is 1/3 as in the US? It's not 1/3. Is it 1/3? It may not be 1/3, but it can be something like half. But at the same time, that salary, so the salary level across UK, not just for academic jobs, generally it is much lower than the US. But compared to other salaries, for example, maybe a software engineer or a data analyst or a data scientist, the salary is much higher than those. the salary in the UK will be something that, for example, a doctor would earn. Okay, so it's not that bad when you consider within the UK, but if you compare it with the US, it's much lower. In the previous slides, in the UK job market starts in July and ends in this. No, so the previous slide was mainly about the flexibility. It's not that it is starting in July. It starts whenever you end your PhD. So throughout the year, you will have job ads coming in and you would apply. Okay, so it is not, so this is just an illustration, but even in November or December or January, you will see job ads coming in. So it's just to show that it's much more flexible. Do most Canadian universities follow the AMA structure? Yes, most of the Canadian universities that we have heard of would also go to AMA. But then there are Canadian universities that don't go to AMA as well. So I won't tell you the name of the university, but I had once interviewed at a university in Canada which did not go to AMA, but had a non-AMA job market structure. Should we have completed our PhD if we apply to the UK? You don't need a completed PhD, but you should be towards the very end of your PhD when you're applying to the UK. But at the same time, you need to know that in the UK, people are quite flexible. So for example, since I was targeting the AMA market, I had not completed my PhD when I joined the job. So I joined the job in April, but I completed my PhD only in August. So as long as you can show that you are towards the end of your PhD, that should be fine. Any other question? No? Okay, let's look at what happens at, what is a teaching load? I'll come to teaching load soon when I talk about the UK market in detail. Okay, so let's look at what happens at AMA. I'll keep it brief, and I'll tell you why, because actually I did not have much experience in terms of flyouts, because by the time, just after AMA, I got the job that I'm right now in. So I never attended any of the flyouts that I got. So I'll tell you what happens at AMA and before AMA. Okay, so before all these things, you might have a question whether you have the right profile to go to AMA or not. Something that you need to keep in mind is that a very wide range of schools recruit at AMA. So not just within the US, but many European schools, many Indian schools, many Singaporean, Chinese, schools from Hong Kong, schools from Australia. A lot of schools go to AMA, even European schools go to AMA. So as long as you have a profile that suits some of these schools, you can go to AMA and you can do this whole AMA process. One way to find out is you can look at recent recruits in the schools that you are interested in and see if your profile sort of fits that their profile or not. And you can always look at the Who Went Where survey and see, which kind of PhD students went to the AMA in the previous year. Generally in AMA, you start off with an application package, and this is something that you need to start creating at least 6 months before AMA. It consists of a cover letter, a job market paper. It need not be a dissertation, but this is something that will define you in the job market. So you need to choose this carefully. You need a CV, a research statement. Some schools ask for a teaching statement. Many schools nowadays, especially in the US, ask for a diversity statement. And you need 2 to 3 letters of recommendations. So generally for US schools, it is 3, right? I will tell you why this is highlighted in yellow. So where will you find jobs? Job ads. So marketing PhD jobs is a place where they collate all the job ads that are posted in various forums. But you should also subscribe to Elmar. So Elmar is a listserv, and every Wednesday they post job ads for the previous that were posted in the preceding week. Okay, so you need to look carefully at these 2 places for job ads. Most applications, so most schools require the same things, at least at the AMA stage. Okay, so what many people do is they just tweak the cover letter but submit the same kind of package to all schools. Okay, you might want to tweak your CV a little bit, or you might want to tweak a research statement, teaching statement a little bit, but generally the package is the similar across schools. Okay, so what most people do, people from schools who have been going to AMA for forever, most of the students apply to a large number of jobs. So maybe some people apply to 60 jobs or 70 jobs. Because this is more like a shortlisting stage than a final selection stage. So people take their chances and apply to as many jobs as they can, because the incremental effort in applying to an additional job is not that much. You just need to tweak the cover letter actually. Whether this is a good idea or not, that's completely different, but this is what happens in the market. So once you have applied, 2 weeks before the AMA or 3 weeks before the AMA school starts emailing you with their interview schedules. Okay, so they will email you giving you a bunch of slots and they will ask you to choose a slot. As an unconnected student from Asia, how do you know whether schools have sent out invitations or not? So there is no official way of knowing. So back when I was in the job market, I really wanted some schools and I never heard from them, and I emailed them and they are saying we are still in the process of sending out invitations. But that was not true from what I heard from other people who had applied. There is this anonymous forum which is called Econ Job Market Rumors. Every year there is a thread created for that particular year's marketing job market. The information there may not be very reliable because it is anonymous. A bit more reliable information can be gained from this secret Facebook page every year, Facebook group, but you need to know someone to get invited to that group. So I'll tell you how I got invited into this group, because I knew someone from some conference. Okay, so the AMA job market runs for 3.5 to 4 days, generally from a Thursday to a Sunday. Once the schools send you an invitation to schedule an interview, that you can then decide which day to schedule. So if you go online, you will see a lot of information in terms of where you should schedule. So should you schedule your most preferred school early in the process or late in the process? There are guides on whether you should schedule your interview in the morning or in the afternoon, whether before lunch or after lunch. From my experience and from talking to many people, I realized that you should just do what you're comfortable with. Personally, I scheduled my preferred schools later because I wanted some practice before I go on to the schools that I really want. Okay, but you can do something else. Maybe you start off with a fresh mind and you want to do your best interviews early in the process. So this is completely up to you. At AMA, at AMA, you would need to register for the job market. Okay, so the conference registration, so there is an academic conference happening, a normal conference, and there is also a job market happening. The registration process for the two are separate. One question that often comes up is, do I need to register or can I just go to AMA if I'm not going to the conference? It depends on the part of the market you want to access. So AMA interviews are generally held in the professor's hotel rooms. If you are only, if all of your interviews are held in someone's hotel room, you don't really need to register. But I would suggest that it's a very good idea to register, because something that happened back when I was in the job market. So if you register, your profile gets created in AMA, on AMA website, and you can go and update your profile. There were a couple of schools who saw my profile and invited me for a talk, even though I had not actually applied to these schools. So they just sent me an email saying that they saw my profile on the AMA job market website, and if I am free, they would love to talk. And one of my flyouts was from one such school. So it's always a good idea to register for the job market, although there are many suggestion forums which will tell you that it's not really necessary. It's also a very good idea to book a room at the conference hotel. generally people like students from Asia, we are budget strapped and we might want to book a hotel book a room at a nearby hotel. But what happens at AMA is you might have an interview at 9 in the morning, and then the next interview at maybe 10:30, and you have this one like half an hour to kill or 1 hour to kill in between, and you don't know what to do. So you can't go back to your hotel. You might have to wait in the lobby. So there are various advantages to staying in the conference hotel. So as a poor PhD student, when I used to go to conferences, I always used to stay at a nearby hotel. But for AMA, I made sure that I stayed at the conference hotel, and it helped me a lot. Okay. I know there are questions in the chat, and I'll get to those once I finish this section. Okay. So what happens during the interview? So you need to present your job market paper using a folio like this. Okay, so you'll hold it on your lap and you will flip the charts. It's a flip chart. So you'll flip the charts and talk a little bit about your job market paper. You should ideally prepare a 20-minute version of your talk, a 30-minute version of your talk, and also a 40 minutes version of your talk. Because going into the interview, you wouldn't know what the school would want. So some professor might say, okay, just talk about your project for the next 15 minutes, and then we'll chat about something else. So you need to be prepared for that. At the same time, there are other schools which might want to delve very deep into your project. And for those schools, you might need a longer talk prepared. When you're present your job market paper, but also present your pipeline. So what else you can do, what else you plan to publish in the future, okay? As I said, many of the interviews are conducted in the professor's hotel room. So the atmosphere many a times is very casual and you are just having an informal chat. But every year there are reports of weird encounters. So it's always always a good idea to have someone you can talk to. So this can be your advisor, this can be some other professor, this can be a conference buddy, anyone. Okay, so make sure you have someone to talk to during the AMA process. Once AMA is done, you should send a personalized thank you note to people who interviewed you. Make sure it is personalized. After each talk, note down things that various people had said, the feedback that they had given, and you might want to include those in your email. So once AMA is done, the schools ask you to, if the school shortlists you, so they will generally shortlist 5 or 6 people, and they will invite each of those people to their campus to give a job talk and meet with other faculty members. And this process takes about 5 or 6 weeks. Okay, so once the job talks are done, if you are lucky, you'll get an offer, and you then accept that offer, okay, after you negotiate. Or you might have multiple offers and you might have to decide which one you want to take. I don't have much experience in this. I'll tell you why soon. Okay, before we move on to the UK market, let me see what are some of the questions we have here. Okay, teaching load, I'll talk a bit later. Letter of recommendations are ideally from your collaborators and your advisors. So they want academic letters of reference, letters of recommendation, who can speak to your ability as a researcher and a scholar. Okay. Do applicants normally ask their referrers to write around 100 recommendation letters? There are tricks to do this. So they can write a recommendation letter and send it to you. And you can include this as within your package. So there are many schools which accept the students sending the recommendation letter. So the referees don't have to write it each time. But there are many schools which ask the recommendation letter should be uploaded to a particular system. If your advisor or if your referee is very comfortable with this, what many people do is create another email ID, which the student manages themselves, and then they upload the recommendation letter. I'm not saying you should do this, but this is something that is done. Okay, but your referee writes the recommendation letter only once, and they don't tailor it to each school. Okay, it's not possible. Job market paper is separate from published papers, or is it your working paper? This can be anything. Ideally, it should be a working paper, so that if people give some feedback, you can incorporate that in your work. How to present a talk about your pipeline. So once you finish your job market presentation, you talk a little bit about the various projects and the key findings from these projects. By job market paper, do you mean the paper relevant to the department, or you are aiming from? So it is the paper that you want to showcase, saying that this piece of work is sort of my best research, or sort of the research that I am aiming to get published in one of the top journals. So it can, generally it is your dissertation, but there are examples of people who chose completely different projects as their job market paper. Examples, what are some examples of candidates negotiate an offer? You don't really negotiate. So generally people don't negotiate salary, but they can negotiate other things. For example, research support or summer pay. If in the US it's 9 months pay, so you can negotiate your summer pay, or you can negotiate conference funding. So there are other things that you can negotiate. You can negotiate you can say that I want a couple of TAs, or teaching assistants, or research assistant. So those are the things that people negotiate when they have multiple offers. Okay, any other question? Otherwise, I'll move on to the UK market. No? Okay, let's look at how the UK market works. So before understanding the UK job market, you need to, do you negotiate salary? So generally people don't negotiate salary. You can, but generally people negotiate other things around the salary, conference pay, and all those other things. Okay. Okay, in terms of UK markets, you need to know that there are different types of schools in the UK. So there are schools which are exactly like US schools. They are just located in the UK, for example, LBS. Okay, the process is exactly similar to AMA. There are highly research-intensive UK schools. They mainly recruit at AMA, but sometimes they have a non-AMA process as well. But today, I'll be talking a little bit about these last two kinds of schools. So you have research-intensive UK schools, which provide a competitive salary. And when I say competitive salary, it's not at all competitive with the US, but it is competitive within the UK market. Okay, so sometimes they go to AMA, but mostly they have a non-AMA process. But the recruitment process is very similar. So you have flyouts happening, and each person is called on a separate day, and the interview process is very similar to what happens after AMA. And then you have research-intensive schools in the UK, which follow a scale-based salary, and I'll tell you what that is very soon. And Leeds, so the school that I am in, is an example of that. We don't go to AMA, and our recruitment process is very different from, for example, this school. Okay. So before, you also need to know something called the ABS journal list. Okay, so most UK schools care a lot about this list, and it is a list of journals which are, I'll tell you what scale-based pay is very soon. So there's a list of journals. It is similar to your ABDC list or any other list of journals. It basically ranks various journals based on, I don't know what, but based on prestige maybe. So the rankings are 4-star, 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. Okay, so most schools care about papers which are 3 level and above. And your 4-star papers are things like your JCR or JMR, those kind of journals, but even psych journals. So Psych Science is a 4-star journal. So on paper, a Psych Science is considered very similar as a JCR. Good journals like IGRM or Journal of Retailing, those are also considered a 4-rated journal, not 4-star, but 4-rated. And then you have 3-rated journals, which are like Journal of International Marketing, Psychology and Marketing, Journal of Advertising. So those are 3-rated journals. Okay. So the schools with a competitive salary, How will you know that it is a competitive salary? It will not mention salary in their job ads. Most UK schools will mention salary in their job ads, but if you don't see a salary mentioned, most probably it has competitive salary. Or they will say that we have competitive salary, or they will use this word. Okay, so we give a market pay or a market supplement. These kind of schools, they expect you to have some revise and resubmit, if not published work in the top journals, FT50 journals or UTD journals, or the top psych journals like Psych Science or JPSP, or the top economic journals. Okay, schools which has a scale-based salary, the salary will be explicitly mentioned in the job ad. They expect some kind of publication. So it need not be your JCR or JMR, even if you have a Journal of Advertising or a Journal of International Marketing, that's okay, right? But what they want is, in the near future, you should be targeting the top journals, IGRM, JAMS, JCR, JMR, JCP, those kind of journals. But if you don't have them right now, even if you don't have RNRs on these, that is fine as long as you have some publication. Most UK schools get their funding through tuition. Okay, so you need to have some kind of teaching experience. If you have teaching experience, it's a big positive in either of these two kinds of UK schools. Okay, some questions here. What do you mean by scale-based? I'll talk about that soon. Having 2 papers in ABS level 3 as lead author is, yeah, it is. So having 2 ABS 3 papers is quite good in most UK schools for a starting position, but you'll have to show in your CV that you are going to target a Journal of Marketing or JAMS, or those kind of JIBs, these kind of journals in the future. Okay, so if you have ABS 3 level publications and all your pipeline is also about ABS 3 level publications, it may not fly. Do we look bad if we only have publications at ABS 2 level? Yes. It's not a deal breaker, but most research schools don't consider ABS level 2. So you would need to have 3 and above. That's what most schools are aiming for. Okay, so what is meant by scale-based salary? So a typical lecturer position or assistant professor position will advertise salary something like this. So the salary will range from maybe 40,000 to 50,000 pounds. Especially for London schools, there is a slight bump. So you get 3,000 or 4,000 pounds as a London supplement, but it doesn't really make any difference because London is super expensive. Another thing to note in the UK is that the salaries don't vary much based on universities. Okay, so there are some excellent universities at very expensive cities which also give you this kind of salary. Okay, so it's always a good idea, especially if you're targeting the UK market, to choose a good school as in a good research focused school in a city which has a cheaper cost of living. Okay, so just to give you an example, what can 700 or 800 pounds get you? In London, probably a single room in a shared flat with maybe 3 or 4 other roommates. In Bath, so Bath is a very good research focused university in the UK, right? So in that city, you might get a very good flat, but you might still have to share it with another person. For example, in Leeds, okay, so Leeds, you can get a waterfront development kind of property, a single bedroom there, which is very posh, or you can get a nice family home, a 3-bedroom family home in Leeds. Similarly, Liverpool, which has a research focused upcoming kind of university, you can get a nice 3-bedroom family home for the same amount. So just to give you an example, taste of how the living costs in the UK vary. So as a rule of thumb, the cost of living goes down as you travel north in the country, but there are some quite expensive cities in the north as well. So just keep this in mind when you are looking at UK schools. Okay, how do you evaluate the UK schools in terms of teaching requirements? So there was a question about teaching requirement earlier in the chat. The teaching is quite different from how it is in the US. Okay, so generally, so as I said, the UK schools generally earn a lot of money through postgraduate students. Okay, so you will generally have a very large class, a very large lecture, And then you would have to repeat tutorials or seminars for this big class. So for example, I teach a class of 300 students, and then I do six or seven seminar repeats for the same repeated seminar or tutorial for these students in groups of 30 or 35. Okay, so what that leads to is higher contact hours compared to the US. Okay, so my friends in the US schools don't teach as much face to face. Okay, but in terms of prep, you don't have a new prep every year. So I have been teaching the same thing for 5 years, and not the same thing, the same module for 5 years. You just need to update what you're teaching. But I'll be teaching hopefully the same thing for the next few years as well. So the first year is a bit tough because you need to prepare something completely new, but you don't have to prepare something new every year. Okay, and many UK schools also allow you to block all your teaching within a semester. So for example, I teach only in the winter semester, so all my contact hours are in February and March, and the rest of the year I do other things. Okay, some questions about these. Do UK business schools welcome candidates from hospitality domain, not traditional marketing? What they care a lot about is the ABS list. So if you are, irrespective of whether irrespective of your PhD, if you're targeting marketing journals, they should be fine. How many hours average per week in teaching? So for me personally, I teach 8 hours, I think. Yeah, about 8 hours every week for 10 weeks, and that's all. So but all my teaching is within a particular semester. So for 10 weeks I'm crazy busy doing 8 hours of teaching, but for the rest of the year my schedule is flexible. So I think that's how it is in most research universities in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. But you don't have to do a new prep every year. So you can, so you teach only 2.5 months a year. Yes, that's what I do. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I do. But you also have to think about the fact that, for example, many of my friends in the US schools, they have TAs. But I have to do all my own grading. So I have to grade about 200, 300 papers on my own. So there are other ways in which you have workload. But then, so there are both advantages and disadvantages to this particular kind of contact hours system. Any other question about teaching? No? Okay. In terms of research requirement, it is, compared to your tenure track jobs, it is very difficult to evaluate research requirement because we don't have a tenure system. So it's a permanent job. So technically they can't kick you out unless you do something very bad. But your promotion depends on your performance. So how do you become associate professor? There is no set rule. So if you go to a tenure track school, they will tell you that generally we require 4 JCRs, or four top level papers or 5 top level papers to make tenure. In the UK, in most schools, I'll talk about extra pay soon. In the UK, you don't have a tenure system. So how do you know what is required? So there is no clear requirement. There's a lot of subjectivity in terms of promotions. There are people who can get promoted only by publishing in 3-level journals, but maybe they are program director of a very large master's program. So that profile is enough to get them into becoming associate professor. But on the other hand, if you have 4 JM or 4 JMR and you don't do that well in teaching, you don't do other things, you can still get promoted. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of the profile that you can have when you get promoted. A good way to figure out is find out who recently got promoted and see what kind of profiles they had in terms of publication and other kind of responsibilities in terms of teaching, etc. Who evaluates you for promotion? Is there a boss system? Uh, your department, so as a lecturer, you report to your department head. Uh, Department head can recommend that you submit your promotion documents, but the decision is taken by a panel who may not be from, who may not be from your department at all. Okay, so that is very similar to the tenure system, so how people make associate professor elsewhere. But in the UK, the department head attends the meeting, although technically he or she wouldn't have a say in the promotion, but they can actually recommend whether the candidate should be promoted or not. So it's a very subjective process. Will the school offer visa? Yes, yeah. So at PhD level, there is a shortage of skilled candidates. So getting a visa is not at all difficult. What is the average number of publications per year in the UK for a balanced research school? There is no such rule of thumb. So imagine that you are targeting only the top level papers, so JM, JMR. Even if you publish one paper every 2 years or 3 years, that's fine. But what many people in the UK do is create a balance. So you publish some 3-level papers, but you also publish 4-level papers, and there is no requirement as such. That's what I'm trying to say. So you can publish a lot of 3-level papers and still do well. You can publish fewer 4-level papers and still do well. Okay, lots of questions coming in. Let me see. Visa sponsorship we talked about. What is so you apply every time, or is it something that the department considers? You generally have a talk with your department head, and the department head unofficially encourages you to, apply for promotion. Do you get to teach subjects you want to? Um, they give you a preference, but generally you cannot choose. Yeah, it's a very structured system in terms of, it's not in like in the US where you can, start up a new course one academic year. The process here is a bit rigid. So the modules don't change year on year. So generally you might be asked to teach advertising even. So I was asked to teach advertising even though I did not know anything about advertising. So I had to read up a little bit. Is there an ongoing appraisal system? There is an annual appraisal system. Yeah, there is an annual appraisal system, and they don't set targets in the conventional sense of the term, but they just keep a track of how you are doing and what is required for you to become an associate professor. Are subject pools common in the UK? In some schools it is common. There are subject pools in some schools. You need to find that out. So there is a variation in terms of whether you have subject pools or not. There is also a variation in terms of whether you have a research lab or not, where you can conduct experiments. No, I did not miss that question. I'll talk about extra salary soon. Is the first year or two, is there any particular target to achieve? It depends on the school. So generally there is some kind of a probation. It's not like US schools. They might give you a target, but it's not written in stone. So imagine that they gave you a target of 1 3-level paper, but you have a second round of JCR instead. That's fine. Do UK research schools provide research funding for faculty? I'm going to talk about that soon. Okay, let's some of the questions are related to these things. Compensation. So this is what a UK schools ad will look like. Okay, so they will give you a salary range. So Surrey is a very good research focused school, and this ad is on right now, so you can actually apply to this job. They will give you a range of salary. Okay, this does not mean that as an assistant professor you start here. Okay, so this is just the range of salaries an assistant professor can earn or a lecturer can earn. If they really like you, they might put you at the top end. If they see potential, but you are still not there in terms of publication, they might put you towards the lower end. They might also put you towards the middle of the salary scale. Okay, so where you are placed depends on various things. There are things that you can get from the HR website of every university, and by law, things need to be a bit transparent. So you can get the salary spine. So what are the various grade levels within this? So for example, if you start at 41,526, the next year you earn 43, the next year you earn 45, then 46, 48, 49, until you reach the end of the scale. There are generally 7 or 8 gradations in each salary scale, but hopefully you won't have to go through all of them because you'll get promoted to associate professor before that. Okay. You also need to find reward, whether the university has any reward schemes or not. What that means is, imagine that you are in this salary scale. You perform well. There are some schools which will give you an out of turn 2 level bump. So the next year, if you perform really well, the next year you might start earning 48 and you might skip this. Okay. This will generally be there in the HR website. Visa fees, moving fees, see if the school provides all these things. So these will again be listed on the HR website. But what will not be listed is other ways of earning extra income. Okay, so someone asked this in the chat. There are schools where you can earn up to 20 or 25% of your salary extra based on various other things. So for example, you can do exec education, or you can teach MBAs, or you can supervise master's dissertation and you can earn extra. And no one will tell you whether you can do this or not, or whether you get anything extra or not, till the day you get the job and they are trying to sell you the job. The school is trying to sell themselves by saying that we give all these extra things. So a good idea might be to have informal chats with people who you might know in that particular school, and see if the school provides these extra sources of income or not. The other thing that is not on the HR website is the research budget. Having interviewed both at US schools and UK schools, the research budget in many UK schools are sometimes better than the US schools. And that came to me as a big surprise. Most UK schools have some kind of a yearly research budget, maybe £3,000, maybe on an average, or £5,000. But there are schools which give you a research budget of £5,000, but then also give you extra money if you, for example, if you get an R&R from a journal. Okay, if you get a JCR R&R, they will give you 5,000 extra. Or, there are richer schools and poorer schools, but you need to find out what the research budget is. Two other things that you need to find out is whether the unused part of the research budget carries over to the next year or not. Okay, so there are many schools where I know people who, they try to spend as much as they can every year because their £5,000 budget wouldn't carry over to the next year. But then there are schools which allow you to carry over, and that helps a lot because in few years' time, you build up enough money to do a large-scale field experiment or a survey. Another thing you need to find out is whether the conference fund comes from your research budget or there is a separate fund or not. So again, there are some schools where you have maybe like 3,000 or 4,000 pounds as research budget, but also 4,000 pounds as conference budget. Doesn't matter right now, but when we are allowed back into conference, this matters a lot because every time you fly from the UK to the US, this can get reduced by a lot for every conference you attend. Another thing that you need to find out is the publication reward system or not. So most research focused UK schools give you some kind of money if you publish in the top journals. Many schools actually give you money even if you publish in 3-level journals. So you need to find out whether the school has a publication reward system or not. Also, whether the money that you get, will you get it as your salary or will you get it as research budget? So that is again something that you need to find out. So these things highlighted in yellow are things that you won't find out on your own. You need to be proactive and contact people within that particular school, have informal chats and try to find out more about the school. Okay, let's see some questions. Is it fine to go to AMA summer market without proposal defense yet? I remember there were schools which explicitly asked me if I have done proposal defense or not. So you can email that particular school and ask what their preference is. How do we know whether schools are more research focused than others? See what their professors are publishing. So if the professors are consistently publishing in 3 and 4 rated journals, they are research focused. If not, they are not. What is enough as a research budget and how do you negotiate it? Generally, you cannot negotiate the basic research budget because it is the same for everyone. But sometimes you can negotiate some extra money. For a CB person, a 5,000 budget is quite good. Even a 3,000 budget is quite good. But make sure that the funds carry over. If they are not carrying over, you might want to have a higher research budget each year. See if there's a separate conference funding or not. If they add more for INR, does it mean it's an external grant? No, it's the department just gives you money because they want that INR to be converted. So you don't have to do anything about it. Okay, another thing that you need to know about the UK is this thing called ref audit. And if you ever land a job in the UK, this is something that you'll constantly hear throughout your stay. It's a government audit which happens every 5 years. And what happens in this audit is the school's research output is judged. Okay, so the last ref happened between 15 and 20. So all the research output from that particular school was evaluated, will be evaluated in this year and the next year. And the next ref period is 21 to 25. And the schools need to submit every single faculty member for ref. Okay. This is important for schools because their funding from the government is dependent on how well they perform this audit. How is this important for you? So if you are in the early years of ref, so for example, if you're in the job market this year or the next year, the schools might be more flexible. So if you have a top level RNR, but you don't have any publication, they might be okay with it. But as you approach the later years of ref, they might insist on you having a 3-level publication at least so that you can be submitted to this audit. Okay, so this is something that you need to keep in mind. So if you are a first year PhD student, most probably you are going to target closer to this. You might want to get publications sooner. Okay, but if you are a 4th year PhD student right now, if you have a RNR from IJRM or JAMS or JCR, it's fine. Even if you don't have a published paper for now. Okay, but next year, as the years progress and we move towards 2025, things might change. Okay, what is the application process? All UK jobs are advertised on this website. Your application is via the school's website. Unlike the AMA market, there is a huge variation in terms of what is required in the application package. Some schools might ask you to write a short essay on how you fulfill all the requirements that they have. Okay. For example, many schools don't ask for recommendation letters at all. They ask for recommendation letters after you have gotten the job. So there's a huge variation in terms of what you need to submit. Mostly there are many schools that just ask for CV and nothing else. Okay, so you need to be careful about what you need to submit. The interview process in many schools is also very different from the AMA. So what happens at many schools, including Leeds, is that we shortlist 4 or 5 candidates and we interview all of them. We invite all of them on campus on the same day. Okay, it's not a 1 or 1.5 hours job talk. Instead, what happens is every single candidate gives a presentation of about 20 to 30 minutes. And then you have an interview with the dean of the school and other panelists for about 20 to 30 minutes. And if you are the first choice, you might get an offer within a week and you have to accept within 1 or 2 weeks. And this whole process is very quick. Again, this is very different from what you might have seen in your school if your school follows an AMA system or a flyout kind of system. Okay, if you cannot make it on a particular day, so you have to make it on a particular day. You don't have a choice. If you cannot make it, you are given a Skype interview option, but all interviews are held on the same day. Could you walk us through what the job talk or panel? Yes, I'll talk about that as well. Teaching statement, research statement, many schools in the UK don't really need. There are some schools which require, but as I said, there's a huge variation in terms of what is required. So it's those statements are not always required in UK schools. Okay, my job market experience. At AMA, I had applied for 45 schools, and I wish I had applied for more, but I did not know any better. I had interviews from 11 schools. 3 schools gave me flyouts, but I did not attend any. So it was not a stellar performance, but it was not a bad performance either. For non-AMA schools, I had applied for 23 schools. I got shortlisted at 8. I did interviews at 3 schools. And what happened in all this was about 2 weeks after I returned from AMA, Leeds gave me an offer and I accepted that, and I did not attend any of the flyouts. That's why I don't know much about the flyout, what happens at the flyout. I've only seen flyouts happening in my school, but I've not done a flyout on my own. The schools which invited me for AMA, so for the AMA interview, they ranged from US schools, Canadian schools, French schools from Colombia, Spain, Turkey, etc. What surprised me was that the North American schools, the US and Canada schools, were very highly sought after schools, and they did not give me a flyout, but the fact that they were ready to talk to me was a huge boost to my confidence when I was on the job market. For non-AMA, I had a Canadian school, I had many UK schools, and I had one Irish school which also wanted to interview me. The UK experience, I had applied to 8 schools. I had interviewed from 3 schools. What I did as an outsider, you need to stand out. Okay, so they may not really believe that you're going to move all the way from Singapore to UK, or even from US to UK. Actually, there are many people whose applications get rejected because schools don't believe that they are going to come even if they are offered a job. So it's always a good idea to email the department head or the search committee chair. Their email IDs are always on the job ad. It's always a good idea to email them saying that you're really interested and stuff like that. During my Leeds interview, I was asked to present on a particular topic. So the presentations in UK school is not like your usual job market presentation. You are given a topic and you need to present on that particular topic. So in Leeds, my presentation was present your current and future research. So I talked a little bit about my job market paper, but I also talked about 2 or 3 other projects that I had and also my pipeline, and that is what they wanted. And another school that I interviewed at, they had this particular topic. So how will you contribute to the teaching of marketing within XYZ school? Okay, so then I had to talk a little bit about what I would do of this particular specific topic. So this is again something different from what happens in the US. So you don't go and give a generic job market presentation for each school. You need to tailor the presentation based on what the topic you are given. I hold Indian passport and I had visa issues. So remember, UK schools are not flexible in terms of dates. They asked me to do an interview or a fly out, I don't know what you want to call it, in 2 weeks time, and I couldn't get visa on time. So if you're targeting the UK market, it's a good idea to have some kind of visa in place so that if they give you an invitation to fly out, you can do that quickly. I accepted Leeds without even setting foot in the UK, even once. Not that I regret, I'm very happy here, but I wish I had. So this is something that, especially if you're from India or if you're from China or any other country which requires a visa to come to the UK, you might need to think about this. I got the job offer the day after the interview, and I accepted the next day. Right, so this whole process was quite quick. Okay, let me see if there are some questions here. How many schools would you recommend applying to? As many as you want, as many as you can actually. So don't think about whether you would want to go to that particular school or not. But what if that is the only school that gives you a job? Will you not be accepting it? So think in those terms instead of. So that is my general advice in the job market. You can think about fit and all these things later. Um, it's always a good idea to apply to as many as you can. Of course, if you are I don't know if you're from Stanford and you have 5 JCRs, that's a completely different issue. But for an average Joe like me, I would apply to as many schools as I can. Okay, can a job market paper be already published? Generally, it is not a published paper. Generally, it's a working paper. The idea is when you're presenting your job market paper, you should, and if someone gives you feedback on that paper, uh, you should be able to say that thank you for that feedback, I will try to incorporate it. If they give you a feedback and you say, yeah, that's fine, but it's already published, then it doesn't really make any sense. So it's always a good idea for your job market paper to be something that is maybe in the first round of review or the second round of review, where you can actually incorporate people's feedback. Okay. So as an outsider, as someone who had never, who did not have much knowledge about whose schools did not have much knowledge about the US and UK market, how did I approach the market? So there are few challenges that I faced. So there were professors in my school who knew a lot about the market, but the candid conversation that you can have with your PhD seniors or your PhD cohort mate is very different from the conversation that you can have with a professor. So because no one before me went to AMA or the UK, the level of knowledge within the student body was not that great. You are also unconnected to people who might have such knowledge, so typically from well-established school. And as an outsider, as an Asian PhD student from an Asian school or school which traditionally recruiters have not seen, you also need to grab attention from the selection panel. You need to stand out. Okay, you need to be seen as a serious contender for the job. So these are some of the challenges that I faced. I started quite early, started the process quite early. So if you go to marketing PhD jobs, they have a list of all the jobs that are advertised each year. I started maintaining a spreadsheet of which schools were applying. And soon I had this idea of which schools are going to apply in my year. So if a school has been advertising for last 3 years, most probably that school will also advertise the next year. So I would prepare more for that particular school, tailor my application more towards those kind of schools. You can also get a sense of which candidates went where each year, and I kept a track of that. And you can find out which schools were more open to accepting candidates who look like you, okay, so whose profiles look like you. I tried to build a profile which would have a wider appeal than a profile that was highly research intensive. Okay, so instead of aiming at JCR or JMR, not that I would have gotten one, but instead of aiming at those, I tried to, as a CB person, I tried to aim more towards the top psychology journals, which generally have a lower turnaround time in the review process. Okay, I also did a lot of projects in completely different topics. What that did was that completely took away my research focus, but it increased the chances of publications that I might have. And also it gave me a chance to say at different schools that I have some kind of match with some faculty members. I knew that I would need to have a wider appeal, and one part of that is to do very well in teaching. So I gave my best. So the semester that I taught, I did very little research and I gave all that I had towards teaching, and I won an award for that. So that helped a lot, especially in the UK. So I remember that in some of the interviews they asked me about this. So that helped a lot. Okay, and I audited PhD modules at well-known schools, and now it is even easier for you because everything is online. That were conducted by famous researchers, like prolific researchers, and that gives you a sense of not only what is expected in terms of research, but how these people, when they are on the recruitment panel, what are the things that they look at. So even in my 4th year, I was doing 1 or 2 audits of modules at other schools. You don't have to do it, you have to do it seriously, but you are not doing it for marks or grades, right? So you are just going and attending others' classes. I try to get as much help as I can. Emailed complete strangers, and very surprisingly, many people were very helpful. When I was in the third year or fourth year of my PhD, NTU recruited a lot of new professors, assistant professors, and many of them had gone to the AMA. So just before my job market, I did some mock interview sessions with them, did job talks with these young assistant professors who had just joined, because they had just been through the process, so they might know a bit more than others who maybe had gone through the process much earlier in their career. I also got feedback on my application material. So remember, you don't have any seniors who have gone to AMA, so you still need some feedback. I asked my advisor to read my application material. I asked some of my collaborators to read, and asked for recommendation much earlier, right? So remember, this is an important part of AMA. So I got recommendation letters much earlier, or at least talked about the recommendation letters with the people who would write me one much earlier, and searched for people who have some kind of some kind of knowledge about the market, so that they can write me a relevant recommendation letter. And I applied widely, although I wish I had applied for more, but as I just said, I thought less about whether I would want to go to a particular school or not, but whether I would accept the offer if this is the only offer that I get. And in most cases, you will know here that the answer to this question is yes. Okay, so a typical advice column would tell you something opposite. So they would say that you should think carefully about whether you want to apply to a particular school or not. But as an outsider, you don't know what your chances are at in particular schools. So applying widely might be a very good strategy. All recommendation letters are from people you researched with, or anyone you taught along with. Generally in the job market, they prefer letters from people who know you as a researcher or a teacher. Okay, so generally these are people who are generally senior compared to you. So they might be assistant professors, associate professors, or maybe full professors. And they should be able to speak about you as a potential colleague in the new department. Yeah. Okay. Can you tell us about the differences in fields regarding job opportunities, quant, marketing, CB, etc.? So if you go to marketing PhD jobs, I don't know whether you can still find that information or not, but earlier in terms of candidates, you could sort the candidates in terms of quant, strategy, and CB. If you are doing quant marketing, okay, let me put it this way. That is the best thing to do right now. If you are a quant marketing job market candidate, you are extremely sought after. CB, a lot depends in terms of publications and the research area. And strategy is, so there are fewer strategy roles, I think, in the US, but there are excellent strategy schools in Europe, for example, or many other places, for example, Singapore or Hong Kong. There are good strategy schools there that you can target. In quant marketing, you don't really need to show that you have a publication. There are many quant PhD students who get a job without any paper published because, for the first 2-3 years, they spend a lot of time trying to learn the methods. But in terms of CB, they definitely need you to have published something. If you go into the market without any publication, or at least an R&R, it might be a bit difficult for you. What specific CB areas are popular in the job market? I don't know. I don't know what areas are popular. I think, and that there's my personal opinion. I think more, especially if you're trying to come to the UK, more than popularity, publications would matter more. even in the US, I think only there are only few schools which care a lot about popularity, because outside of the top 25, maybe they are more concerned about whether you publish or not. Okay, so my topic was not at all popular. I was doing regulatory focus, but surprisingly, most schools cared more about you know whether you can publish the paper or not, and what other papers that you have. If you while doing that, if you have a very interesting upcoming area, then that's fine. But a dominant strategy might be to think more in terms of getting published. Any other question? No. Okay. And the last thing that I think I should have done more was network more. So once again, as a PhD student in an Asian school, I had very little connection with the place where the real action was happening. So I should have attended more conferences earlier in my PhD. What I saw in the job market was all these connections that I built during the conferences helped me a lot in the job market. So not just in terms of knowledge, but remember I told you about a secret Facebook group every year. The person who invited me was someone I had met at a conference. So that these kind of connections, these kind of networks help a lot. I should have leveraged others' connections more. So I should have asked my advisor to email certain people, or asked other professors I know to email certain people, ask more for favors. And as as an Asian, as an Easterner, you have this sense of face or embarrassment that you don't want to do this. But I would ask you to be shameless and ask as many people as you can for help. I should have done an exchange program. I know many people who want to target US schools or Canadian schools. What they do is they do a semester. So if they're from Asia, if they're from India, or if they're from China, they do a semester of exchange in one of the good US schools, and that helps them in terms of building connection. And the more co-authors that you have, the more are the chances that you will know people in terms of network, but also these co-authors will help you write your um, recommendation letters. Okay, few other questions. Any thoughts about short-term contracts like summer teaching abroad? It's not a bad idea, especially if you want to go to a balanced school or a teaching focused school. But if you are aiming for a research school, it may not help you much having a teaching semester abroad. But having a visiting position abroad, like for example, a sabbatical or a 6 month semester of abroad, doing both teaching and research, starting up more projects, those things might help. Are there schools that focus on qualitative research? Yes, there are many schools that focus on qualitative research. For example, Bath, the University of Bath that I mentioned, they are a very good qualitative school. Liverpool is a very good school which has qualitative focus as well. There are many other schools. So just go through the UK schools list and see whether people are publishing qualitative work or not. Especially in the UK, there are many good qualitative schools as well. How do I approach an exchange program? Do I need a co-author from the target geography? Yes, ideally it is through connections, but for example, I know Columbia has a very structured exchange program. So as long as some professor is ready to support you, you can do an exchange there. In the UK, Cambridge has a very structured program. So Cambridge has a visiting doctoral student program that you can apply to. Does a UK PhD education system give you exchange opportunities? I know people from, I know people, PhD students from Cambridge and I think Imperial, they do exchange of a semester exchange in some other school, but not, so it all depends on, so the UK PhD is quite flexible as long as if you're okay with taking more than maybe instead of taking 3 years, you take 3.5 years and do half-year exchange somewhere else. You can do that. It's not, most people don't do that. That's the only thing. So it's a possibility. Anything else? No? Okay, the last thing that I want to say, and I want to leave you with this, is that something, especially if you're from an Asian school, the experiences of your previous students in your school is a very weak predictor of what you can achieve. Okay, so many people, if at all you're trying to target the AMA market or the UK market or the European market, for example, many people will say that no one from our school has ever gone to these markets, so how can you? But that is not a very good predictor of what you can achieve. So as long as you have a good profile, you try to work hard and build a good profile. Um, that is what that matters. Okay, so that is the only thing that matters. Okay, that is not the only thing that matters, but that plays a very big role in your success in the job market, and not what PhD students who came before you achieved. Okay, so that is something that you should remember. The other thing that you should remember is, as an outsider, as an Asian student from Asian schools, you need to stand out. So there are different ways of standing out in the job market, but the best way of standing out is getting papers published. Okay, so if you are like a first year or second year PhD student, try to focus more on getting things published by the time you are in the job market, and that will help you a lot when you are trying to look for a job. Okay, so that's all I have. Are there any other questions that you might have? Does prior job experience in the industry help? No one actually ever asked me about my job experience in the industry. It might help in teaching. You might bring up the point that, I have extensive industry experience and I can bring that to my teaching. But what most of these research focused schools care about is papers. And if your experience speaks directly to the kind of research that you do, then that's fine. But just by itself, industry experience is not a very helpful indicator. If we don't have publications yet, what are some of the ways in which you can polish your profile to attract employers? If you don't have publications yet, the next best option is to get revise and resubmits. Okay, so just submit multiple papers and hope that a couple of the journals give you an R&R. That's the best way to go. Other ways of attracting recruiters is, for example, having doing an exchange program, for example. So if suppose you don't have any papers, but you have projects which you started during your exchange at a very good, research intensive, prestigious school, for example, that can act as a very good point to attract recruiters. Yeah. Just to confirm it right, the scale-based salary is basically the salary spine. What happens in the competitive salary case? What happens in this competitive salary case is they give you, for example, they might say that your base salary is 40,000 because every use case school has a scale spine. But then they might give you 20,000 pounds as market loading. So you might end up getting 64,000 pounds instead of 44,000 pounds. So you'll still get that 1,000 pounds or 2,000 pounds increase every month, but you earn much more than not much more, depends on which school you're going to, but you earn more than what a scale-based school will pay you. Asking what's the publication requirement for in the permanent UK job position? Most UK job positions are permanent. So if you start as a lecturer in any of these schools, those are permanent positions. What will happen if you don't meet the requirement? What will happen if you don't meet the requirement? They can't kick you out, but they can make life difficult for you in other ways so that you resign. Or what many schools do is ask you to go on to a teaching track, but they can't kick you out. That's the thing, because of the employment rules. Yeah. Did you consider doing a postdoc position? Any thoughts on postdocs? Postdocs are a very good option, especially if you can work with a prolific researcher. I think you'll learn a lot if you do a postdoc, especially if you don't have enough publication right now and you want to target the market in 2 years or so. Having a postdoc is good. Advertised salary is pre-tax. It's pre-tax. It's not post-tax. Tax in UK is quite high. but UK is sort of a welfare state. So things like education and education for your children, healthcare, all these things, public services, these are all free. Okay, but the taxation is relatively higher than, it's relatively lower than European schools, but relatively higher than US schools. Does UK have an adjunct system as well? It is starting to have an adjunct system right now. Business schools don't really have a very big adjunct system, but it is becoming more and more common. But if you have a PhD and publication, generally um, UK schools would give you a, if they won't give, you won't have to go through an adjunct position. They might give you a research fellow kind of position, or maybe a lecturer on contract position, and not really an adjunct. But it might become more common in the future. Switching to a teaching track means a salary reduction? No, it does not. So salary does not depend on, um, how should I put it? The salary that you start off with, that won't get decreased. But what might happen is people, so suppose two people join, one person does not perform that well and is shifted to teaching track, the other person continues on a research track. In the future, that person, the research track person, might end up earning more, but your salary won't be reduced. So your career progression might get reduced. But then there are many ways in which you can actually earn quite well in teaching tracks. So you might start teaching exec MBAs, for example, or exec education, and then you can earn through that, or you become the program director of a postgraduate program and you can earn through that. Yeah, I know there is no AMA conference this year. I am not sure. Actually, I don't know what to tell you about how the job market will function this year. I'm not sure. But most of it will be Skype based. You should still, unless you are a star in the job market, you should still apply widely and apply to as many jobs as you can. Okay. Will I get extra paid if you teach summer? So there is no summer teaching here. Just people in the Europe just take the summer off, basically. So there is no summer teaching, but there is MBA teaching and EMBA teaching, and you can earn more unless it is part of your workload. Then you don't earn more, but you can earn more. Depends on the school. For example, in Leeds, there are other ways of earning extra money, but not through MBA and EMBA. But I know there are some very good schools where you can earn more money through MBA and EMBA as well. So it depends on the school. You need to find this out. Oh, okay. Two more questions. European B schools follow AMA pattern or UK pattern? Depends on the European schools. There are many schools which now go to AMA, but there are also other schools which follow the UK pattern. So it's a mix of both. So if you go to marketing job markets, marketing PhD jobs website, you will see which schools go to AMA, and most probably those European schools will follow the AMA pattern. Last question. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think we can end the talk now.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Dr. Basu. That was really insightful. I know I learned a lot and about the different job markets, and it was interesting to see both perspectives, because sometimes we only get the U.S. perspective and sometimes the U.K. perspective. So thank you for sharing kind of the overall scope there. I am going to put a list of all of DocSIG's information in a text file here. I'm putting that in the chat now. And so we really encourage everyone to sign up for the DocSIG emails to be notified of future events. As was just talked about here, AMA is going to look very different, summer AMA this year. So we figured that this was more pertinent than ever to have this presentation, because navigating the job market is just going to be so uncertain for a lot of us, right? We do have a lot of really cool events coming up, so be sure to sign up for those emails in our newsletter. We are going to be doing a 2-part workshop of crafting your CV, which again is going to be more pertinent than ever with you being digital, right? So I want to thank everyone that's here. I know that there's a lot of DocSIG members here. I know that I see a lot of us working really hard here to bring these webinars to you all. So thank you all for joining. Again, Dr. Basu, thank you so much for your time. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. We had great turnout for these webinars, and we're really looking forward to the next one, which I believe is June 5th, Friday, June 4th, June 5th, something like that. And so stay tuned for Friday, June 4th. And that's, now we talk about the job market here, and then on the 4th, we're going to be talking about once you secure that job, you know, what do you do, right? You secured a job, great. So what's next, right? So hopefully these webinars build on each. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Shankha.
Yes, thank you. Very insightful.
My pleasure. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.